Hey everybody, it's Friday, and boy, do we have a big weekend of college and pro football coming up. Matt, we touched on your Georgia Bulldogs going up against Texas tomorrow and a big slate. So why don't you jump in real quick with your must-watch games on the SEC?
The must-watch games in the SEC are going to be your two top 15 matchups. Oklahoma going on the road at Alabama and Texas going on the road to Georgia. You've got playoff implications sitting in both those games as Texas and Oklahoma sit at 2 losses, paying a visit to two teams that have 1 loss. And it's a situation where if they were to both win, then it's now you now are in a very much a doomsday scenario in terms of the SEC and the way people view it, because there's going to be an outcry if these guys win, because you're starting to look towards how many teams is the SEC getting into the college football playoff. Because if Texas and Oklahoma win out, then you're going to have a big conglomerate of 2-loss SEC teams, especially if Vanderbilt were to win out, that now all have a legitimate case for the college football playoff over the likes of, some potential Big Ten, ACC, and Big 12 teams. And, it was what ended the BCS era when LSU and Alabama played for a national title. I think in a lot of ways, it was also what ended the 4-team era when Georgia and Alabama were making it, or, two SEC schools continued to make it into that 4-team playoff. Is people wanted more seats at the table, less SEC. So the same thing is happening here, is that if you get this big conglomerate of SEC teams, then it's going to make a lot of people angry, and particularly people such as, Jim Phillips of the ACC, over there in the Big 12 and Big 10 as well. I can't remember their commissioner's name right off the top of my head because I'm blanking.
Who's the Big 12?
Big 12 and Big 10, honestly.
Big 10 is Big 10's Tony Petitti.
Yep, there we go.
And Brett Yormark is Big 12.
Okay. Yep.
And by the way, just for sake of, we mentioned it yesterday, the Big 12, when Baylor bailed out, he was replaced by the AD at Arkansas, giving the SEC now the power position in the CFP.
Yeah. What's it called? Yeah, he was given he is the replacement as the chairman. I'm not sure. I think he was already on the playoff committee. He just replaced him as chairman.
Yeah, he just stepped up.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they
like a promotion.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they replaced him.
No, well, actually, technically, yes, he replaced him. He was on the board.
Okay.
So he was elevated to that position. So technically, yes, he replaced him. Did they go outside to get another person? No.
Okay.
So if that makes it any clearer, right?
Yeah. So, they took a hit there, but it's really going to come down to to what happens this weekend. And if you're sitting at home and you're rooting for one of these Big 12 or Big 10 schools that's kind of right there on the edge, outside looking in potentially, you're rooting hard against Texas and Oklahoma this week, because although I didn't pick them in my predictions, these are games that they can win. Talked about it yesterday. Texas rolls in there with the number 2 rush defense in the country, and Georgia's improved this year in rush defense, or in their rushing offense. They're 24th in the country right now. But they are still going to have their work cut out for them. If they're not able to establish that run and they put a lot more pressure on Gunner Stockton, then it could make for a difficult evening. But I also talked about Kirby Smart and his ability to game plan for Texas in that wide zone. That's where that Texas offense starts, and that's where that Texas offense goes. If they can run wide zone and run the football efficiently out of it, then they're set up for success. It's something that they were unable to do last year against Georgia. They totaled somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 total yards between Georgia's visit to Austin and the SEC title. They didn't have a lot of success. In terms of Alabama and Oklahoma, the headline that I wrote up for that one was it's really just revenge. People probably remember Alabama's trip to Norman last year being
Mm-hmm.
a death blow for their college football playoff hopes. They went in there, they scored 3 points, and they got embarrassed by an Oklahoma team that, quite frankly, just wasn't good last year. This is a team now that's rolling into Bryant-Denny Stadium. John Mateer's back. You would hope that he's continued to get healthy, but John Mateer's also a guy that's only averaged 183 passing yards a game since his hand injury against Auburn. That Oklahoma offense has lacked consistency from the quarterback position. They've lacked a deep threat from the quarterback position since Mateer had his injury. And Alabama's offense is going to have to throw the football. They have not been great running the football. They struggled last week mightily against LSU in terms of doing that. But this is another spot for Alabama to continue to cement themselves and prove that they've taken that next step forward under Kalen DeBoer.
Yep. And it's things are shaking out. If you're an Alabama fan, things have been shaking out for you, in the last few weeks.
Yeah, they've gotten they've just gotten better since they lost to FSU at the start of the season. I mean, there's just no other way to cut it up. Ty Simpson's been one of the best quarterbacks in the country. He's top 3 in the Heisman, as he should be. Personally, I think that he carries, in terms of the Heisman contenders between him, Julian Sand, and Fernando Mendoza, I think he carries the best win. He went on the road at Georgia and they won there, and he was incredibly efficient. They executed their game plan the way they wanted to, and they won that game on his arm and his decision making. So I think he's going to have a legitimate case, but he has to continue to play well. They needed him last week to beat LSU, which sounds crazy to say because LSU scored 9 points, but I think they had somewhere in the neighborhood of like. It was ugly last week. I'm not sure they eclipsed 60 yards rushing. So they have to do a better job of running the football against Oklahoma, just flat out, plain and simple, because they have one of the best edge rushers in the country in R. Mason Thomas, and a defense under Brent Venable. It's very good and very opportunistic. They play consistent defense week in, week out. You're not going to their peaks are pretty high, but their floor is also very high in the style that they play. So Alabama has their work cut out for them. And if they're not able to run the football and create that balance, then you could start seeing some issues in Tuscaloosa on Saturday afternoon.
Okay, well, I don't think the governor's going to be there, so that might help.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts at this point? And I know it's I'm not going to hold you to it, but who do you see in the championship game in the SEC?
I think it's going to be Texas A&M and Alabama. I really do. Both of those schools have just been consistent, and Texas A&M's case is more about their defense. Mike Elko does a fantastic job with their defense. Their strength and conditioning is much better. They have a lot better depth. Their D-line is fantastic. I talked about R. Mason Thomas being one of the best pass rushers in the country. Cassius Howell and the bend that he has off the edge for Texas A&M, it's some otherworldly bend. I mean, you can just go back and watch that LSU game, and there's a clip of him. I mean, he had just busted LSU's left tackle's ass one play. He beat him off speed, and then he bent right around him and got to the quarterback immediately. LSU had to follow it up, calling a timeout, and you just see him jawing. They are a really, really confident bunch right now. They have a very manageable end to the season. Their biggest test is going to come in the last week of the season when they head to Austin, Texas. But I still don't think Texas is a formidable enough opponent because Texas A&M's offense is built through the air. They live and die by Casey Conception and Mario Craver. I mean, those are two of the best receivers in the country. Craver is one of the fastest receivers in the country, and they are a fantastic tandem. So that's where they live and die on their pass game and their ability to make explosive plays through the pass game, and then they just shut you down on third down. I believe they're the best third down team in the country. Mike Elko does a fantastic job of getting you to third and long, and when they get you to third and long, that's Cassius Howell's down, and he
Right.
owns it every time.
Well, I'm thinking that this is going to be one of the. This could be one of the more entertaining races in the SEC as to who makes it, and in some regards, as we look at the playoffs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the SEC is so strong, they've basically eaten their own.
Mm-hmm.
You could make an argument for anywhere from 6 to 8, maybe even 10 teams from the SEC that have a legit shot at a playoff.
Yeah, it's fully. I think your line's probably at 7. I think that's where your
Okay.
7 is because the grouping of teams with 2 losses only
Mhm.
really stretches to that 7 mark, and that's kind of where you need to be. I get it's the SEC, and maybe they would have a potential for an argument, I guess, but
Mhm.
Vanderbilt sits with 2 losses, Oklahoma
Right.
sits with 2 losses, Texas, and then you have the 4 schools that have been firmly planted in the top 10 for a while.
Right.
The only team outside of that group would be if you're talking about Tennessee, who already has 3 losses.
Right.
I don't think they had enough on their schedule in the first place if
Right.
they were to win out. So I don't think they're really an issue. But if you're a fan of the Big Ten and you're a fan of the Big 12 and you're a fan of the ACC, you are 100% rooting for Alabama and Georgia this week. You're hoping that either Vanderbilt loses this week or in a couple weeks they lose to Tennessee. You want them to find another loss along their way as well, just because that eliminates those 3 teams on that back end and gets you to where you're at a solid 4 number for the SEC.
Yeah. We talked about this many times, but you can't go 7 deep in the Big Ten.
No, you can't, and it's not a. I think people misinterpret this argument. There was a very long time that the SEC was an extremely top heavy league,
Yeah.
and that's where they got their title of the dominance of the SEC because the top was so good. The roles have kind of switched here in
Mhm.
the past couple of years, where the top of the Big Ten has felt a little bit better than the top of the SEC, but the SEC feels like they have more depth in their league now than
Mhm.
they used to. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Just because you get numbers in doesn't always necessarily mean you are as a whole. It doesn't mean you have a better top end of the conference. It means you have more
Mhm.
conference depth, but you probably may not have or a national champion in that conference.
Yeah. And I do think that this is probably going to be the year that uh, the Big 12 gets the 2 teams in the playoffs.
Jim, I'm going to be honest with you. Just the way that I see things shaking out, I think they're
Mhm.
going to get 3.
Really?
I
Okay.
really do. Now, granted, I haven't gone through and taken a deep dive at the schedule,
Right.
but the grouping of teams, Utah's sitting there at 13, and Utah's last 3 games are against Baylor, Kansas State, and Kansas. Baylor has a winning record; they're at 5-4. Kansas State has a losing record at 4-5, and Kansas is 5-5. These are not the best teams in the country, but Utah has to go on the road for 2 of them. So, and the way the Big 12 is, there's definitely room for error. Don't get me wrong. But
Mhm.
Utah is a really good team. And I think Kyle Whittingham understands the position that his team is in and the opportunity that they have sitting in front of them because they do have an opportunity to go out there and make a statement. And they also are going to need some help from the SEC this week. They're, again, rooting for Georgia and Alabama to knock Texas and Oklahoma back a notch. And then you also look at BYU.
Mhm.
BYU sitting there on the outside. The expectation would be if things were to go as odds makers have them, that they'll move up into that top 10 this week. But they again don't have their work cut out for them necessarily. They have TCU coming to Provo this week, and then they go to Cincinnati next week. So they're far from over. But if the Big 12 teams handle their business, and by the way, I didn't mention Texas Tech. I don't have to mention Texas Tech. I know who they are, and I know they'll be there. And you also have a scenario where one of these teams is going to have to win the conference. And if it's not Texas Tech, I think Texas Tech will still end up there. So if you have a different team win the conference, say Utah makes it to the conference championship somehow.
Right.
Somehow is a very key word there, because BYU only has one conference loss. So you'd need them to lose 2 games in order for Utah to make it. But it's just a scenario that I think has set up really well for the Big 12 in terms of where the ACC is, the depth of the Big 10 right now, and ultimately what I think is going to be the SEC kind of eating their own, as you said.
The I guess the game of we talked about Pat Narduzzi the other day at saying he didn't care if they lost 100 to nothing to Notre Dame because it didn't count, it didn't matter. I think Pat might have phrased that a little better from the standpoint of we would like to, we expect to go in there and play our best and win, but if we don't, that doesn't hurt us. I will. This has an opportunity. Pitt has an opportunity, in my mind, to establish themselves as the legitimate, top of the ACC if they go on the road and beat Notre Dame.
Yeah, they absolutely do. Listen, Pitt's 5-0 since they inserted their backup quarterback into the starting role and benched Eli Holstein.
Right.
Their offense has been better, just flat out. They've looked like a significantly better football team. They've played like a significantly better football team. All of their work is ahead of them. I mean, this is in terms of a brutal stretch for an ACC team, this is as brutal a stretch as you can have to end your season as an ACC team, because they have Notre Dame at home this week. Next week, they're going to travel to Atlanta to play Georgia Tech, who is currently the leader in the Atlantic Coastal Conference.
Right.
Then after that, I can't remember if they go to or Miami comes to them, but they have to play Miami, who, again, regardless of their record, is a really good football team talent-wise. They have a fantastic defense, Ruben Bain Jr. coming off the edge. So they still have their work cut out for them, because they've made it through this far in their conference schedule.
Right.
But the worst is ahead.
Yeah. And if they can get past it, then they absolutely deserve it.
They absolutely do.
So,
yeah. And I'm going to be honest and say that I think they will probably make it through it. Pat Narduzzi said it himself, is as much as this result should matter, and I want the result to matter of this big game at noon, because that's what it is. It is a big game, and it is putting Pitt on a national stage that I think it really does deserve. But the matter of the fact is the only way it matters is if Pitt wins the football game.
Sure.
If Pitt wins, Notre Dame's out of the playoff. No bones about it. At that point, you're looking at Notre Dame and the resume that they present, and you see, you played well early in the season against these really good football teams, but you still lost the games. And then later in the season, when you played your best opponent since you played those guys, you lost that one too. They would have no argument whatsoever, and we would throw them out the back window of this college football playoff race.
Well, they also would have lost 2 games to 2 ACC teams.
Yeah, which is a resume killer this year for the ACC.
It's really funny. Pat Green is the AD at Pitt, and little known, you have to go into the archive here, but what he did, I should say, Green did, was they share a practice facility with the Steelers. And, if you've ever been there, folks, it's a pretty simple. The campus and the proximity to Assessure Stadium, I'm going to always call it Heinz Field, but anyway, is walking distance. Okay. It's not a long trip to that area. So it's not an on-campus stadium, but it's not, you don't have to get the car and drive 20 miles to get there. So what they did is they worked with and are working with the the Steelers front office on how best to develop NIL, and they're practicing. And Tomlin has gone over, and many of his assistants have wandered over to take a look and help out. And it's kind of a collaborative effort between the two people. That if you go in one door, you're in the pitch facility. If you go in the other door, you're in the Steelers facility, and it's in the same building. So there has been a very interesting mashup, if you will, of a college, team practicing in the same building as an NFL team, and sharing thoughts and sharing, coaching ideas, and I think that is why Pitt is beginning to find themselves back among the talked about football teams in the country, because of their ability to work with their NFL partner.
Mm-hmm. I tell you what, they need to work with their NFL partner on. They need to work on that field and the condition that it's in. Every
Mm-hmm.
picture that I've seen of that football field, especially if they play like a back-to-back on it, with Pitt
Mm-hmm.
playing Saturday and the Steelers playing Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
it's nasty looking. Like that is it looks like it's in really rough condition, which, natural grass in the north may not always be the most the easiest thing to keep healthy, especially this late in the year. So it's not an easy job, but that field, the pictures that I continue to see of it, feels like at this point on a weekly basis, it's a rough and ugly field. But also back to the football side of it, I really just cannot say enough about how good of a job Pat Narduzzi has done since he's been at Pitt.
Mm-hmm.
I know they haven't been like, a national title contender year in and year out.
Mm-hmm.
And you get late in the season, and especially these last few years, it feels like they've been in some form of the ACC title contention. Like they've had a really good team. I mean, last year, I know it didn't work out for them this year, but last year Eli Holstein was really good for them. And again, a credit to Pat Narduzzi is this year, when things weren't working out with Eli Holstein, he made the switch, and he didn't wait too long to make the switch. They found something that was working, and they stuck with it, and they went with it, despite maybe the natural train of thought is like, well, Eli, he cut his chops here. He played really well for us last year. We're gonna continue to give him the opportunity. They didn't do that, which could potentially, it probably is a bad look if it doesn't work out, but it did work out, and it was the right move. And I think it's a move that oftentimes coaches are a little bit afraid to make.
Yeah, and I think to your point about Pat, he he's a Pittsburgh guy. I mean, he really, he's been there. He's been around the programs for years, and there's much to be said. It's like we always talk about Arizona State and Kenny Dillinger, and how he works with his team. He loves that area. He knows that area, and he can recruit that area. And so it's a lot in Pittsburgh about, as I said, the synergy between the Steelers and the Panthers, and Pat's getting more of a buy-in from Green and the rest of the university.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel like I've talked about it every chance it's even slightly come up.
Mm-hmm.
The buy-in from top to bottom, and how crucial and important it is in college sports to be aligned with your higher ups, your AD, the board generally, and also whoever's in your boosters and your NIL collectives. When everybody is on a one-track mind in terms of the direction you're headed, it does so much for a program. Talked about it with Texas Tech and how they own their NIL, but they understand what they're doing in their NIL. And they have a very coherent plan that they're all on board with. The same goes for Ole Miss. Same goes for Indiana. Like these programs that have emerged over the past couple of years, and specifically in this NIL era, there's a reason for it. It's because before maybe they didn't feel like they were on the same playing field. They didn't necessarily have the brand power, but now the way NIL is, now that they're aligned in their collective and they have a really good game plan for it, everything's just kind of worked out because they've been able to invest and invest correctly into the sport that they love.
Right. And, when you get that buy-in, not only from your own fans, right, and your own supporters, but you get it from your neighborhood professional football team. Um, you know, think of taking a kid who wants who wants to play at a program, right? And oh, by the way, when you walk into the building, you say, "Just a minute, I'll tell you what. Let's make a quick right turn and go over to the other side here." And would you like to meet, T.J. Watt? Would you like to meet, Mike Tomlin? Would you like to meet Aaron Rodgers? They're right here in the building, same building you practice in.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that they do a better job of, when Belichick came to North Carolina, Michael Lombardi's big line was, we want to be the 33rd NFL team. Well, I think Pitt might be doing a better job of being the 33rd NFL team right now than they are.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. You sit there and you go, well, how do we recruit? Well, you recruit by selling yourself, but selling the area too. Just not just the school. It's it's what is around you, right? If you're going to be there for 4 years, maybe, some not so much. But if you're going there, you want to know what's around you, right? And if you have access, literally, to a professional football team, coaching staff, and just even being around the pros themselves, you get a feel for what the NFL is like.
Yeah.
It's not an abstract there. It's an actual fact.
And
I often wondered why Miami didn't do that. Because the Dolphins, share the stadium with, the Hurricanes. They've never had a really decent. They haven't had a bad relationship, but they haven't had an overwhelming relationship either. The same could be said of out at UCLA, where you've got the Rams and the Chargers, and there hasn't been a lot of interaction between either USC or UCLA out there.
Yeah. What's it called? UCLA is moving into SoFi here in the near future. I can't remember.
Probably that's what they're hoping. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember when that deal starts, but if I remember correctly, they have agreed to it.
It's a couple years. Yeah.
Yeah.
They have 2 more years on the Rose Bowl.
Yeah. So they'll still be a little distance. In terms of Miami, they might just be scared that the Dolphins are going to scare recruits away with the product that they put out on the field consistently.
Well, going back in time, and many people have seen it with the U, and the both of the U's 30 for 30 features, which have all been done really well by Billy Corbin. There was a time, and it hasn't been that long ago, when the Hurricanes were the most popular team in Miami, and the Dolphins were like playing second fiddle to them. It was the Dolphins calling guys like Ray Lewis and those kind of guys, Warren Sapp, and saying, "Hey, we'd like to go to the club tonight. Can you get us in?" So,
oh, Lord. Wow.
That was the way it was. They took it, and just take a couple quick minutes here. I honestly enjoyed my time around Miami with Jimmy Johnson because Jimmy just didn't care. Okay.
Mhm.
Jimmy was like, if I can beat you 150-0, I'll beat you 150-0.
Yeah.
And, you know, there were, he put the pedal to the metal and just said, screw it, man. I don't care. You know, we're going to
Yeah.
win and we're going to beat them so bad they're not going to want to ever play us again.
Yeah.
And that came, ironically, uh, because of a chip he had on his shoulder because he didn't get the Arkansas job.
Wow. What a odd like transition when you don't get the Arkansas job to go to Miami.
Well, I
What
mean,
in contrast.
yeah, it's where he played. So
Hmm.
he thought, maybe I can get back there. Well, it didn't work out for him, and so he was more than happy to make Miami. I mean, there was a famous, and it's chronicled in the 30 by 30, but there's a famous um, meeting between the president and Sam Jankovic, who was the AD at the time, and Jimmy, after they went to the Cotton Bowl, played Texas, and beat them so badly that Texas went to the NCAA and tried to get them to outlaw all of the antics that the Hurricanes performed during that beatdown in the Cotton Bowl.
Mm.
And and Jimmy said to the president and to Jankovic, "Did you bring me here to win, or did you bring me here to create an atmosphere of maybe winning but maybe not? Because I came here to win. If
Yeah.
that's not what you want, then tell me about it and I'll move on."
Yeah. Which I mean, that's really the mindset that you would want out of your head coach. They typically the best ones don't tend to enjoy the politicking of football. They want to just be like, hey, give me what I need, get out of the way, and I'm gonna go win you football games.
Right. Uh, Speaking of winning football games, you talked earlier about Louisville, right?
Hmm.
That game's tonight. Clemson and Louisville. That's a big game.
It is. I'm actually really interested in Friday night slate
Hmm.
because Minnesota will go on the road to Oregon, and that's not a game that's probably going to catch the eye of a lot of people. And I would say, at least on paper, rightfully so. Oregon's a football team that I'm kind of interested in. They've lost a decent amount of weapons on their offense, and they had an ugly win last week at Iowa, but it was a win. Like, it was a good gritty win they had in some rough conditions. Came away from a really good Iowa team that knows how to run the football and plays good defense, and they survived that one. But it's not that one that gives me as much pause. It's the result they had prior to that against Wisconsin. They won 17-7 at home against Wisconsin in what was an uninspiring performance. And then they went on the road and they beat Iowa, but it was another close game. They've played two close games in the Big Ten recently. I'm kind of curious as to where they are and how they bounce back from last week at Iowa on a little bit of a shorter week against a not great opponent. Do they handle their business, or are they in another spot where they look the same way they did against Wisconsin at home a couple weeks ago? Um, I don't think it's something where Oregon's necessarily in trouble right now, but I do worry about the Ducks in terms of their long term outlook based on some of the injuries they've had.
Let me ask you about this. PJ Fleck,
Hmm.
who's Minnesota's coach, he was in a Lane Kiffin situation. What was it, 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah.
And everybody wanted him, and he just decided, you know what? Uh, I like where I'm at.
Hmm.
I may not win national championships. I may not be the highest paid coach, but I'm pretty comfortable here.
Yeah.
And there's much to be said about that. PJ could have had a number of jobs, and he stayed right there in Minnesota.
Yeah, I think their situations are a little bit different simply for the fact that I think that Lane Kiffin does have a national championship ceiling at Ole Miss right now.
Right, sure.
That he's able to bring in. PJ Fleck he did a really good job a couple years ago. Not that he's not doing a good job now, but they've just since the NIL era, they just have not been the same football team. Maybe that's something where PJ's message doesn't resonate as well in an NIL era, because you go back to when Minnesota really had those 9-10 win seasons, and he had them rolling. It was these are guys that are really bought into Minnesota, and PJ Fleck himself. Like, you listen to some of the guys that came out of there, and the way they talk about PJ and the program that he built there at Minnesota. I wonder if that hasn't gotten dimmed a little bit in the NIL era. Um, so there's that, but there is something to be said for staying, because I guarantee you that even though maybe they're not enjoying the same success, if it's a place that he really enjoyed being there, then he's happy as long as they're happy, I would assume. Obviously, you want better results, but at the end of the day, he can kind of sit back and understand that he didn't move his family, like he didn't displace his family by taking a bigger job. He didn't go somewhere and in search of a big payday. Is he stayed at a place that was happy to have him, and he was happy to be there.
Yeah, and his success, while it may not be on the on the Ohio State Michigan side of the ledger, he's had a success that each year they come out and have not just a chance to win the championship in the Big Ten, but they have a very solid chance of making the bowl and winning. And it's kind of like the state of Minnesota. They're cool with the fact that, okay, we're not going to win a lot of national championships, but PJ runs the program the way we like the program to be run. And there's no drama with PJ Fleck.
No, there isn't. And also on top of that, PJ has done a very good job of putting guys in the NFL when it comes to being at Minnesota.
Right.
He's done a really good job. They're going to have another guy this year named Coy Parrish that's probably going to get drafted relatively high as well. So there's not a whole lot of room for up. It feels like at this point for Minnesota, there's room for growth and there's room to improve. Don't get me wrong, but it feels like kind of the state they're in, and I would assume they're probably not going to ever be in a position where they're getting just a whole heck of a lot of NIL.
Right.
Sure. So there's a ceiling on Minnesota, but I think that PJ Fleck's okay with that ceiling. And also, I think that Minnesota is probably going to be in a position where they're upsetting some teams annually.
Yeah. I mean, and again, it comes down to comfort, right? And expectation. PJ's not the kind of guy who, like you mentioned, is not the kind of guy like Lane Kiffin. It's if he doesn't win a national championship, he can live with that.
Yeah, he absolutely can, and there's no reason not to either.
No, that's a good point. Let's see. We got Notre Dame, Pittsburgh. We talked about that. We had a game tomorrow that's kind of interesting. It's on Fox. Gus Johnson, Joe Klatt. Michigan's playing Northwestern, but they're playing them at Wrigley Field.
Yeah, Northwestern has
That's more of a gimmick, actually.
Yeah.
They're building a nice stadium in Northwestern.
They are. It will be done next year. They have officially played their last game at the lakefront practice field. That was their home stadium for a couple of years.
Oh my God, yeah. That whole area. Honestly, Northwestern is a beautiful school. The stadium was absolutely dismal.
Yeah, that's understandable. I've seen some of the pictures, and it wasn't, at least like visually, it wasn't fantastic.
I'll tell you something, Matthew. That been doing events in Chicago a lot, and actually throughout the Midwest. Ohio is, Cleveland was the same way. Anytime you're near one of the Great Lakes, It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter if it's, summer or winter. It's cold.
Yeah.
I, it's you wonder how it's possible. It's like maybe it's 90 degrees on the other side of on the other side of town, and here it's not.
Yeah.
What happened to that 10 degrees I just lost going across the Dan Ryan Expressway to get here?
Yeah. What is it? They call it the what is it? The lake effect.
Yeah, it's a lake effect. Snow is lake effect during the year. But we
Mm-hmm.
used to have a joke. The crew had a joke in Cleveland that summer was August 16th, and if you missed it, too bad. Just fall started on August 17th. Um, but I was looking at the other games in that early window. Um, USF and Navy. That's that. Obviously, if USF wants to make it to a playoff spot, they're going to have to win out in say 4 games to do it. The
Mm-hmm.
game against Navy, ESPN2 tomorrow at 12 o'clock. Roy Philpott and Sam Marshall on the call. That's it's a big one for USF. Navy still, is only a one-loss team, and that's going to be a crucial game for them. I'm trying to look down here. I really don't see anything else in that 12 o'clock window that's compelling. You said Arizona. You had already touched on Arizona, Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm. What's it called? The Texas A&M South Carolina game is not one that I'm predicting. In fact, I think that Texas A&M is probably going to roll pretty easily there. But it
Mm-hmm.
was a part of as I was going through the games this week in the SEC in particular, the theme that I noticed or that I noticed throughout the SEC in some of these matchups is there's a theme of revenge
Uh-huh.
across some of these games. Obviously, you have the game with Alabama and Oklahoma, the team that knocked Alabama out of the playoffs. For Texas and Georgia, you've got Texas who got curb stomped by Georgia twice last year. And when I say curb stomped, you're going to look at the scores and be like, they didn't get beat. They got beat physically last year. Texas did both times against Georgia. But then you go into these other games and it's the same thing. Florida travels to Ole Miss. Florida was the team that knocked Ole Miss out of the college football playoff last year as well.
Uh-huh.
When Ole Miss went to Gainesville, they handed them their third loss, and I can still kind of remember seeing Jackson Dart's face after that game. It was like confusion. They just didn't understand what had happened. And you pair that with all the noise that Florida fans have been making and
Mm-hmm.
all the noise around Lane Kiffin heading to Florida. You want to talk about making a statement. They have an opportunity this week. And the same goes for South Carolina when they go on the road to A&M.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, they didn't knock A&M out of the playoffs, but they might as well have. They handed A&M their second loss of the season,
Mm-hmm.
and with that, they knocked Reuben Owens out for the rest of the year with an injury. Obviously, that's not something they did intentionally, but it's something that Texas A&M people marked as a turning point in the season last year, and why Texas A&M ended back up at their 8-4 mark instead of continuing to climb and ultimately making that 12-team field. So it's one that has the potential to be a mental hurdle, but in terms of talent and the way South Carolina has played this year, you would expect Texas A&M at home to show up ready, understanding what happened last year, and wanting to completely wipe that from the record books.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Let's pop over and see what we got in the 3:30 window that we just talked about Alabama, Oklahoma. Texas Tech has an easy game against UCF.
Mm-hmm.
NC State and Duke. I'm sorry, NC State and Miami. You mentioned that one. Um, bum, bum, bum. Virginia Duke. That's might be an entertaining one.
That's a matchup of one-loss conference teams. Both those
Mm-hmm.
teams have one conference in the league. If you're the ACC commissioner, Jim Phillips, you are just down on your knees, begging and praying that Virginia wins this football game. Because the absolute last thing that you need to happen as the ACC commissioner is Duke, one, make the conference championship, and two, win the
Win
damn.
the conference championship, right?
Because you're talking about a 4-loss champion, and you want to talk about a scenario where you start looking at potentially having two group of 6 teams group of 6 champions in there.
Right.
That's the situation. That's the big one. That's the doomsday scenario for everybody in the ACC. For as rough of a year as the ACC's had, they still know that they're getting one playoff team in. They think if Duke wins that conference, now granted they're going to have to, they have to win out and they'll have to win some conference games, and that'll look a little more favorably on their resume. But they're not playing the world beaters. They're playing Virginia, and then they play North Carolina, and then they play Wake Forest. Like, those last 2 games are not resume builders by any stretch. So they need Duke to lose this football game to eliminate them from the conference race, because if they make it, then all hell breaks loose at the ACC league offices.
Yeah. And you really don't have – if Duke wins out and is, we're playing here on a Friday afternoon, and has the opportunity to make the college football playoffs as a 4-loss team, they're not making the college football playoffs for the 4-loss team.
No,
they'll either fill it with an ACC or an SEC or an SEC team and the group of 6, or as you say, hell, they may even, if they think the group of 6 2 teams are worthy of it, they may just give it to them.
Yeah, and I'm looking. You still got a decent way, but I mean that's not the only doomsday scenario for them. SMU's sitting there with 1 loss in conference, and they have 3 losses overall.
Right.
They finished the year with Louisville at home and Cal on the road, so they don't have necessarily an impossible path by any measure. But the fate lies in the hands of these top 3 teams. These are the top 3 teams that they need to see in this conference championship game. And that's Georgia Tech, that's Virginia, and that's Pitt. But the problem is that Georgia Tech plays Pitt, and Pitt plays Miami as well.
Right.
So they have this scenario where everybody just kind of caves in on themselves. And I think in a scenario where you have a 3-loss champion, you're most likely going to get your ACC champion in. I don't see them taking a group of 6 team over a 3-loss ACC champion. But it's still a wide open race in the ACC, and what I think is the worst way possible for them.
The way you don't want it to be. I put in a call, by the way, to Billy Hillgrove, who is the voice of University of Pittsburgh, and we're going to see if he can join us in the next week or so, just to see what's going on in the Berg. Miami is a home game for them, for Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
They play Notre Dame at home. Georgia Tech is in Atlanta, and then they come home to Miami.
Fun little note on that Pittsburgh-Miami game to end the year. I don't know if people remember, but Miami was rolling back in 2017. They had 1 loss. They were destined for the college football playoff. And then they ran into Pittsburgh in the last game of the season. And Pittsburgh ruined Mark Richt and Miami's playoff hopes and dreams up there at what was Heinz Field at the time.
And now, not so much.
They've played spoiler for Miami. Can Miami turn around and play spoiler for Pittsburgh this year?
No, I think that's going to be that'll be interesting to find out. Also in the 3:30 window is number 21 Iowa and number 17 USC. I mean, I know the Pac-12 is gone, but seeing how USC and UCLA have absolutely struggled in the Big Ten just goes to prove once again the biggest mistake they ever made was blowing up that Pacific Coast Conference.
Yeah, USC comes in 7-2 overall, 5-1 in conference. This is that Big Ten depth that we were talking about, to where it's not that they're a bad conference, but the depth just isn't the same level, because this is a group of teams that's hanging in the 17-21 neighborhood. USC at 17, Michigan at 18, Iowa at 21. This is where your depth lies for the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
Look at that depth, and you see 3 losses, 2 losses, 2 losses, with one of those teams at least taking another loss this week. But it's an opportunity for these schools. Just really, I think it's an opportunity for USC more than it is an opportunity for Iowa. We kind of have an understanding of who Iowa is and who they have been under Kirk Ferentz. But USC has long been ridiculed under Lincoln Riley for their lack of physicality. Obviously, mainly on the defensive side of the football. But this is a potential for a statement. Iowa is a really good physical football team. They play defense well, like I said earlier, and they run the ball well. It feels like USC's kryptonite under Lincoln Riley. Can they overcome it? If they can overcome it, they're not in the worst case in the world. There's going to be sitting there with 2 losses, 1 loss in conference play. And to be honest with you, they're not that far off from the conference championship discussion, because this is a team that didn't play Ohio State. They're not on Ohio State's schedule. If I remember correctly, they didn't play IU either.
No.
You could have another situation, because I know we almost ran into it last year, but you have a situation again this year where if USC wins out, now granted they have Oregon later in the year, and they'll also finish with UCLA. That's where they stand in terms of after this week. But you have a situation where you may have a 3-way tie if Ohio State and Indiana were to falter. Or even if one of them falters, then you are going to have a tie with USC, and you don't have that clear tiebreaker. And you may know this off the top of your head. I don't. I don't know how the Big Ten tiebreakers work.
The Big Ten tiebreakers, I think if it's not head-to-head, it's wins. Let's see. Let me make sure.
Is it the record of your wins? Is that what they're going to factor?
I think it's the highest ranking. If the highest, not ranking in the AP poll, but the rankings in the computer. Let me look real quick.
Oh, I'm sitting here looking at it. Oh, by the way, if Michigan survives the next 2 games for them, so Northwestern, a trip to Northwestern and then a trip to Maryland.
Yeah.
That last game of the season, Ohio State goes to Ann Arbor. And if they go to Ann Arbor and Michigan wins these next 2 games, then Michigan has a chance to knock Ohio State out of the conference championship and insert themselves into it.
And okay, so then it's potential, playing this out, just having some fun. It's potential that they could face SC it could be Michigan and SC in the title game.
There is that scenario kind of out there in the Big Ten, yeah. Huh. It would take for both of them to.
There's a lot of ifs on this one.
Yeah, for both of them to make the conference title, it would take Indiana also suffering a loss and them being valued more, or USC having better, winning the tiebreaker over Indiana as well, because Michigan would obviously have the head-to-head. USC, surprisingly enough, if Michigan were to win and beat Ohio State in that scenario, I was incorrect. If USC were to win out and Michigan were to win out, USC gets in the conference title over Michigan because they have the head-to-head win.
Okay. So they would play Ohio State, theoretically?
In that scenario that I just laid out, they would play Indiana.
Oh, Indiana, okay.
Indianapolis for the conference title.
Oh, my God. Can you imagine SC in Indianapolis playing against Indiana?
Insanity to think of 2 years ago. Now it just kind of feels like the way we are in college football.
I mean, they never have games that are that important at the University of Indiana.
I mean, I'll just be honest. Seeing Texas and Atlanta last year for the SEC, that felt weird. Like, that didn't feel right. But, I'm still getting accustomed to realignment and the way that college football has changed, at least in my perception of it.
Mm-hmm. It's I'm the traditionalist who really just wishes that the conferences were where they were when they started for realignment years ago.
You and me both.
I thought that was the best way to do it. And at the end of the day, the irony of all this, and it looks like it's careening in that direction, that if college football goes to the NFL format, you can end up with teams, going back to the West, going back to where they were, and the conferences is, there are other teams, the teams that actually don't make the big money, are going to be stuck in conferences where they're traveling all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they absolutely are.
So that's it's not something to look forward to. Let's go one more quickie here. If you're up at 10:30 at night, or if you're over on the West Coast, the game to watch might just be Boise State and San Diego State. It's a 10:30 game on CBSN.
Yeah, it's possible they're going to be battling with TCU and BYU at that point. But it's another. That's the Mountain West Conference. We've laid out the nightmare scenario for the ACC, and not that it's going to happen, but that means that there is a path for the Mountain West champion. Because I'm still of the belief that when it comes down to it, the American champion is going to get the nod this year over a Mountain West champion.
Yeah.
I just think they have a better overall resume. They've had teams ranked. The Mountain West has kind of been left off to the side since Boise hasn't been what they were last year. San Diego State's 7-2 though. They have the ability to go out and win. They're favored by 1.5 at 10:30 tomorrow night. So they have their work cut out for them. It's weird just seeing the conference that was thought of higher last year, and maybe it's I'm misperceiving the way it was last year. Maybe it was less about the conference and more about the belief of who Boise State was, and honestly kind of building their case off of their close loss at Oregon a majority of last year. But there's still a really good conference and a solid conference. And if they put a 2-loss team like a San Diego State out there as their conference champion, they're not completely out of it just yet.
No, not at all. And the other thing is that if you look at it, the quality of play at the Mountain West is really good. They're not as deep as the American this year. They have been deeper in other years. And I think what Boise has done is, they kind of was like what UCF did when they upset. Forget who they upset in the Fiesta Bowl, but anyway, Oklahoma. Yeah, did they both beat Oklahoma? Wasn't it?
Who?
Isn't the team that put Boise State on the map? Wasn't that a game that they beat Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl?
Oh yes. That was the
Statue of Liberty play.
Statue of Liberty. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. The pass into the toss, that as well.
Right. Pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if you're talking about last year, they played Penn State.
Yeah.
The Fiesta Bowl.
Right. And Ashton Gently, who's now playing for the Raiders, was there. So, I mean, look, there's history there too. So we'll have to see. All right, let's pop over the NFL real quick. Last night, as we expected, New England rolled past the Jets. They now, I believe it's a 2-game lead they hold at the moment over the Buffalo in the East.
New England has everything in front of them. The rest of their schedule is relatively easy. Right. They're in control of the division, which feels like an odd thing to say. But they are in the driver's seat in terms of their destiny and where they're going to be seated in the playoffs. Because with the schedule they have, the 1 seed is very much in play for New England.
Okay. We already talked about this a little earlier this week that 700,000 people queued up for 60,000 tickets for Washington at Miami. Which, if the game was being played in Washington or Miami, you could walk up and get a ticket for $25. So that's Sunday morning in Madrid. If you're going to go someplace, that's a nice place to go.
Yeah.
Play football.
I'm not sure I'll be getting up for that one.
I'm not sure that either Washington or Miami is going to get up for that one.
Yeah.
To see how it works out. Sunday night's game on NBC, Detroit at Philadelphia. This is kind of like, to me, it's like a survivor test. Philadelphia's offense is like pretty lame lately. Detroit's offense has been pretty good, but their defense has, not been that great. These are two teams that everybody, had penciled into the playoffs and potentially, Philadelphia may even, be good enough, as they said, to repeat. But they're not playing that way. Neither of these teams.
Yeah. The Lions' defense, specifically that secondary, is akin to Swiss cheese. There's just a lot of holes on the backside of it. A.J. Brown, he's been extremely vocal throughout the season. He was vocal again this week. He went on a live stream and continued to make some comments alluding to his play this season and his share of touches this season. Still not exactly pleased with it, but if you're going to get A.J. Brown touches, this is a good week to get A.J. Brown touches because that Lions secondary has had injuries, and when they haven't had injuries, they haven't played well anyways. So they have an opportunity. I think they need to do. I haven't watched a ton of the Eagles this year. I'll just be flat out honest because watching their offense this year has been like watching nails on a chalkboard. I mean, it's just awful. But they win football games. Despite their offense not being good, they're 7-2. So their defense has been fine. Their defense has been really good, actually. So their defense can carry them for a little while. But at some point, that offense is going to have to catch up with the defense. Saquon Barkley hasn't been the player that he was last year. Not that he's been bad, but he just hasn't been the same guy. And Jalen Hurts in that passing offense hasn't looked the same. This is a similar script, it feels like, to a couple years ago when they came off of that Super Bowl loss to Kansas City and both of their coordinators left town for head coaching jobs. Similar set of circumstances here. One of the coordinators left, Kellen Moore's out, the offensive coordinator got cycled back through, and now it feels like they're in a similar spot that they were a couple years ago where that offense is stale after a change of coordinator.
Yeah. I think I can't say for sure, but I think that part of the problem with Saquon Barkley this year is the Philadelphia offensive line doesn't seem to be playing as well.
Yeah, and I mean that's the way their offense went, and to expect the offensive line to continue playing that well, I believe they've had some injuries in terms of Landon Dickerson and Cam Jurgens.
Right.
Those guys have kind of dealt with some injuries this year. And then you add in the age of Lane Johnson. He wasn't going – there was just no physical way for him to continue playing like that forever. It was going to come eventually where he wasn't playing at that all-pro level. That's happened this year. So, yeah, the offensive line hasn't played that well. And it's really – to be honest with you, it was probably the MVP of their team last year when they won the Super Bowl in, 18? I think the offensive line may have been the MVP then. And when they made it a couple years ago, the offensive line was probably the MVP then. That's where this Philadelphia team starts. That's where it ends. And it hasn't been as good. So subsequently, they haven't looked as good.
Yep. Let's roll down real quick and go through Tampa Bay is on the road to Buffalo. That should be an interesting game. The Bucks offense hasn't been playing too well lately because of even more injuries, and we'll see how that goes. Baker Mayfield, I think, has got a slight oblique because there's a lot of stuff he's not doing that he did do early in the season, basically running. Buffalo definitely needs the game. So does Tampa Bay. Not as much as Buffalo does, but these are two teams that need to win, and playing in Buffalo is an absolutely very, very strong advantage for the Bills.
Yeah, Buffalo needs this one just to save a little face after losing to the 3-7 Dolphins last week.
Right. Cincinnati is at Pittsburgh. Now this has a chance to be a very fun game. As you may recall, a few weeks ago, when Cleveland sent Joe Flacco to Cincinnati, and Mike Tomlin spent 10 minutes in his first press conference berating Cleveland for sending Joe down to Cincinnati, where he promptly beat the Steelers in that game on I think it was a Monday night. I think.
I think
It was
so.
a night game. I remember that. Might have been Thursday. Anyway, now it was revenge. It's the revenge of the nerds. Cincinnati's going to be, in the Berg to play Pittsburgh. So, and Harlan and Trent, that's a fun group of announcers for that game. Mm-hmm. Kevin and Trent. So that should be fun. The Chargers come east to play Jacksonville. The Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde team in the AFC South. I don't know what you're going to get. The Chargers have been playing well, and we'll have to see if they continue to do that. Afternoon game, big game in Denver. And it's a rivalry game. Kansas City and Denver absolutely do not like each other. And because they're in markets that we don't particularly, pay attention to, I don't think a lot of people realize how much these two teams, we're going all the way back to the 1960s in the AFL, where these guys absolutely despised each other. So there is a revenge factor in this one. Denver would be more than happy if they could roll Kansas City. And Kansas City on the other side is like, be happy to take off Buffalo. I'm sorry, Denver. Denver, these are two teams that are fighting for a division title.
I talked about Kansas City the other day when we were talking about the playoff race, and I talked about how Patrick Mahomes and that offense had really kind of found their rhythm since the return of both Xavier Worthy and then more recently Rashee Rice. So that offense has been good. This is the defense that you really get to test yourself against, though.
Yeah,
because they played well up until this point. This is a different level of defense that they're playing in Denver. Denver's defense is fantastic, and they've been fantastic all year. They pressure the quarterback really well. Nick Bonito is one of the league leaders in sacks. They have multiple guys along that defensive line that have reached double digits in sacks this year. So, they've played some good, but they still lost to the Bills. They handled their business against the Commanders and the Raiders recently. So this is one where, yes, Kansas City has looked better. They still haven't looked invincible. This is the one where you have to go prove it, because because after this one you get the Colts at home, which is another one that's kind of going to test you in terms of your defense and your physicality up front, because Indianapolis loves to run the football. It's a tough back-to-back stretch for them. But if they are the Chiefs team that they've been in the past, they'll win it.
Well, I wouldn't bet against them. I don't bet against Mahomes. Not a good plan. All right, let's see what we got coming up on the other side. Baltimore, Cleveland. Baltimore's playing well. Cleveland, not so much. So I think we can walk over that one. Chicago, Minnesota. That's CBS's A game. Which just goes to prove that CBS doesn't really have much to do this weekend. Chicago, Minnesota. Chicago's playing better. Minnesota, I don't know. It's not what I'm going to hang around to watch.
Yeah, it's one where you kind of get better sense of who the Bears are. They've had a surge recently, and they've found ways to win football games. They haven't always been the most convincing of ways, but they've found ways to win football games. I talk about it with the Falcons all the time and their inability to find ways to win football games.
Right.
The ability to find ways to win games is just important as your ability to be able to dominate football games.
Mhm.
So they've found ways, but now Caleb Williams is playing a defense that at the start of the year, he had one really good drive against, and he looked like shit for the rest of the game.
Mhm.
So he has to go into Minnesota and play that Brian Flores defense. They don't really have to worry about Minnesota scoring a whole bunch of points, to be honest with you.
Mhm.
But they're still gonna have to score on that Minnesota defense, and it's going to be interesting to see if Caleb Williams is up to the task this week.
Yep. Absolutely. No question about that. All right. Let's see what we got else. Green Bay at New York. That's the game where Jameis Winston's going to start for the Giants. Green Bay's been up and down all season long. I don't know what's going to happen there. I think talent-wise, Green Bay should win, but the Giants. I don't know what the Giants are going to be like with Jameis Winston.
With everything that's going on in New York, you would hope that Green Bay is going to win this football game. I know they've been inconsistent, specifically out of that offense and Jordan Love. Their defense has been pretty much the same throughout the entirety of the season. So defense travels. They're carrying that defense with them, and you're getting Jameis Winston's first start of the year. So I would assume that Green Bay should be able to handle their business with New York.
I don't know that. What did Jameis start? He started maybe 1 or 2 games last year.
Yes, I believe.
I can remember one. I don't know if there
Yeah.
might have been another.
Where was he last year?
He was in Cleveland.
Oh yeah, he definitely started one last year then.
Yeah.
I don't even have to look it up. I can't tell you that I 100% remember it off the top of my head, but just the way that Cleveland is, I know that revolving door of quarterbacks spun and it landed on him at least one time last year.
Yep. Yeah, that is a carousel. There's no question about that. All right, let's finish up here. We got at the Mercedes Dome, you got Carolina taking on the Falcons, and Carolina's been pretty decent lately.
Yeah, they're 5-5. They're playing much better. Just overall as a team, which I think is a plus because I don't think they made that many really good additions to their team in the offseason. They made some good additions. I think they drafted well. Tyrell McMillan's played well for them for the majority of the season, but they've just played better as a team as a whole, which is really good for them. It's also a team that embarrassed Atlanta earlier in the year, 30-0 in Carolina. And I got to be honest, I couldn't be less interested in this football game. I have no interest in watching the Atlanta Falcons. I don't have a whole lot of interest in watching the Carolina Panthers. And I think, to be honest with you, if you're living in Atlanta and you are a Falcons fan, you shouldn't have any interest in watching the Falcons either. They're 3-7. Some change has to happen. I don't know what change that is, but they just aren't a good football team. And they had the talent to be a good football team. That's why it's infuriating. So I honestly really don't care.
Well, just to your point, over approximately almost 2 decades, the University of Georgia Bulldogs have doubled the Atlanta Falcons ratings. So if that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what does.
Well, I don't have to be looking at any ratings to tell you. I can tell you I've been to a Monday Night Football game for Atlanta this year, and I've been to a decent amount of Georgia football games. Georgia has no problem filling a 93,000 seat stadium. However, even with significant help from the opposing fan base of Buffalo, they still could not fill their 60,000 seat stadium at Mercedes-Benz.
Wow.
So ratings aside, they can't fill a stadium. Georgia can.
That is that's crazy. But, it is what it is, right? Seattle Rams, that's a that's a very important game.
Yeah,
That's late
division
in the
matchup.
clocks. That's that has implications for playoffs and has implications of seeing how it's kind of like taking a look at whether or not Matt Stafford is legit with regard to people talking about him as the MVP in the National Football Conference. So far, he's done everything they wanted, and the Rams have been pretty good. So
Yeah, yeah.
um, we'll see how Seattle travels.
He's up there for he's up there in the top 3 in terms of MVP odds right now,
Sure.
and he's playing a top 5 passing defense in the NFL in
Mm-hmm.
Seattle. So this is a prove it week for Matthew Stafford and that Rams offense.
Mm-hmm. We already talked about Detroit and Philly, which happens on Sunday night. Monday night we'll talk about on Monday, I should say. Dallas at Vegas in that game. It's on ESPN and ABC. There's still an issue with between ESPN, Disney, and YouTube TV. Don't look for that to be solved anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
So make arrangements for your local ABC affiliate if you live in Vegas or in Dallas, because that's where you're gonna find them. So yeah, there you go on that one. Let's see, anything else on the docket here? Baseball fans, we mentioned that we thought Otani and Judge would get the awards for MVP, and Otani and Judge, excuse me, got the MVP awards for the National Foot. I mean, Major League Baseball. So no surprise there. Feeling like Captain Obvious on this one. That was pretty simple one to go for.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see how things play out there. One other thing, if you're a soccer fan, and we know we have a lot of soccer fans out there, the MLS is going to go to the international schedule next season, and that'll be very interesting to see how that works. It's a longer season, and it begins in August as opposed to right now. Basically, the MLS plays the majority of their games in a situation where they end up at the end of this regular season, in the around the winter time. So we'll see how things go with that, and it's worth considering if you're a soccer fan that now everybody's going to be on the same FIFA situation. I have a feeling that was done for two reasons. One, because of the Olympics being played here in the United States, in Los Angeles, and the other being that if the MLS wants to onboard some top stars from the European League, they can do so by getting them in the transfer window. So that would be my guess as to why that turned out that way. But yeah, those are two things that we're not on the bingo card for today, but we definitely wanted to let everybody know where things stood in that one. And what else? Let's see. Any other last thing going on? And I'm looking down through the headlines real quick. We know that Trayvon Henderson had a heck of a night last night. We mentioned that.
I held on to him in my fantasy league and finally
Yeah,
benefits. Thank
there you
goodness
go.
Vrabel had him riding the pine all year.
Yep. We'll talk a little bit more next week about some college basketball, which is starting to get rather heated. So there you go. And Lamar Jackson will start. He had a problem this week that made him forced him to practice only on Thursday, and so now we know that he will be starting as the Ravens look to get their fourth straight win. Cooper Kupp is obviously playing against his old team this week. And if you look at it, Puka Nakua has kind of become Cooper Cup.
He has. I think that's why they were okay letting Cooper Cup walk, is because they felt like maybe his best years were behind him, and they could upgrade like they feel like they did with Devontae Adams. Because you look at his numbers this year, and he's been all right, but he has not been the Cooper Cup that was once a Triple Crown winner.
Right. Well, before we get out of here, there was one question that came across from our fans here, and they asked me to specifically ask you this. Since Arch Manning spurned the University of Georgia, when he comes to town this week, is there going to be any, outward boo the moment he steps on the field?
No. I would struggle to call it spurning the University of Georgia. Arch Manning grew up a Texas fan. He wanted to be the quarterback of Texas. He liked Sark. He always liked Sark better. I would say Georgia did a good job being as in that race in terms of recruiting as they were. They put together a really good pitch, and he was interested, but ultimately I'm not sure anyone was ever going to beat Texas, in all honesty.
Right.
I would not expect an outward boo. I would expect a boo for just Texas in general. They're not gonna boo Arch Manning in specific. I talked about it yesterday. I said Texas has left a bad taste in the mouth of Georgia fans. So far, the only thing I've seen on Twitter that they've been able to throw when in an attempt to, have a little jawing back and forth on the internet this week has been the picture of Gunner Stockton with his helmet off. What they conveniently forget is the next play, Georgia scored the game-winning touchdown. They don't have a lot in terms of what they can say, but what they do have is the number 2 run defense in the country. That's going to have to carry the day for them. Other than that, there's not going to be anything else in terms of storing lines, unless ESPN wants to make something up.
Not that they haven't done that in the past, but yeah. What else can we do to hype this thing up? I don't think they can do much more than what's being done to hype it up. I think it's hyped up enough at this point.
Nope. Brands do it for themselves.
Yeah, just strap the chin strap on, and as my old buddy Gene Deckerhoff says, let the leather hit the leather, and let's get this thing going. So There you go. Any final thoughts before we get out here on Friday?
Not off the top of my head. I'm expecting a weekend full of favorite wins in the SEC, and there's that put. I say that, but as another Saturday approaches, chaos always awaits.
Oh yeah, always reign supreme. All right, my friend. You have a good weekend. Everybody else have a great weekend. We'll be back here on Monday at our normal time of 3:00. Just so you know, because of the horse racing season. The 3:00 period will be taken up by Let 'em Race, and we look forward to our buddies over at Let 'em Race having a good time, and that you get an opportunity to enjoy their fine work. So check them out, okay? All right, until on Monday, until Monday. For Matthew, I'm Jim. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Okay.